Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to a new era. This is my new blog using OBS, and I'm not quite sure what to call it yet. Um, Really, it is blog 53, dated 26th of February 2023. But you could also look at it as being year 2, blog 1. So it's going to be a bit of a confusing start, but take one of those as you want. I'll probably make my decision when I post this up. Um, and just want to say thank you very much for staying with me and supporting me. Um, this is going to be pretty new. I'm a little bit nervous about this, so just to let you know, I've been fiddling about a little bit with OBS, so at the moment I'm using camera 1. But look, I can go to camera 2. This is my mobile phone that has been linked up, and it has a little bit of a better sensor. I'm not quite sure of the positioning yet, but it seems to be a pretty decent picture. And then when I want to do some media stuff, I can sort of like point to here. But we'll go back to camera 1. Hopefully it will stay steady. And we'll start it off as we normally do, which is the news. Okay, so we keep the war all the time, don't we, in our thoughts. And this is what I read this week. Moscow cuts its oil supply to Poland as the president welcomes China's involvement in the peace process. All the news that I saw this week on the internet announced that Saturday marked the 1 year anniversary for the war. Yes, and a lot of that news that was there, you had to pay for to sort of subscribe to read. And I really don't need to backtrack across it all because I want the war to end. Um, that's my big feeling on it. It's been disastrous. It's not only affected the people involved in the war, but it's affected world prices, how we now work and how we now interact. So let's just hope that the war ends soon. We moved a little bit to politics, and as you know, all of this news is not my opinion on anything, and I have no real opinion on politics or anything. The Prime Minister Sunak set to announce a Brexit deal in Northern Ireland. The deal would overhaul post-Brexit arrangements and end a 2 year standoff. Yeah, if I remember rightly, when Brexit was being announced, one of the big problems was Ireland, or the island of Ireland, as they kept calling it, which I thought was double Dutch, but it is. And that is the borderline where the shipping is for fishing, where the borders are for going into Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, and how Ireland interact with the European Union because they remained. So apparently, Seneca's got some type of plan. He feels very strongly that it will be ready for Monday, according to the news reports. I wish him good luck with that. It will be a big thing out of the way. But of course, some backbenchers are saying, let's hope it does work, because if you read between the lines, it could start a civil war. Oh my God, when I heard that, I went, oh, is that something to say or what? And then one for a few of my friends that do watch, and that is an earthquake. Yes, there was a midnight tremor in South Wales. It had people sharing their experiences all over the net as they woke up to their walls shaking. It was a 3.7 magnitude earthquake from what I could read, and it happened at 11:59 on Friday night, so 1 minute to midnight, so very close to Saturday. Must have been pretty scary. Apparently they've had a couple of earthquakes. This is near the Brecon area, so a little bit east of Cardiff. So I've been there once, so I'm not very good with where things are geography wise in Wales, but I'm glad to hear that there was nothing that caused major concerns to anybody living in that area. And now we go to our shout outs. Now, a bit convoluted and a bit complicated, the shout outs this week, because my output was a little bit more. So I had people that were commenting on my blog, and then there were people that didn't comment on my blog but commented on some of my other feedback. Every single one is appreciated, so I think that they all deserve a mention. So I'm going to read it all out now. So some of these commented in all of them, and if you did, thank you so much. I mean, that's very, very nice of you. So the shout outs are Martroid, Jambon, David Retro Games Play Badly, Wee Bob Art, Denny, Carl Todd, Steve's Gaming, LFC Gamer and Vlogs, GTB Films, Milfy Swimbuckle, David Connolly, C64 and Colin Jones. All three of those commented on the advert special that I did after my blog. Then there is David Ryan, Paul Robinson, Ponder, and the one I destroy all the time, Magda Kazarazak. Hey, now hopefully I'm getting that a little bit better, but I still don't know how to pronounce your name. Still no video yet, but thank you so much for you watching the Aka R review that I did of Jeff Minter's new game. And then we've got Ian Batchelor, 20th Century Gaming, and my old mate Mainmeister, who all commented on my new little project, which is my 8-bit years, for which I did 180 darts from Mastertronic on the Mad label. Yes, that was very fun. And I mentioned in there about future plans, and I just want to express on that there's going to be some little projects. So there's going to be 8-bit years, 16-bit years, and the console years. And the reason for that is it won't be long before I go back to work. When I go back to work, I'll have less time to do things. It'll be therefore very good if I can set up OBS that I can do 10-minute little shorts that cover huge chunks of my gaming history. The 8-bit era covered, must be 7 or so years. The 16-bit era must be pretty close to that, 6 years. And then the console era sort of went parallel with my PC era. So that continues to now. But I'm going to sort of like concentrate the consoles as being sort of like 1988, 89 to around about the year 2000. So we'll sort of end at the Dreamcast. And it'll be in the same format as the other two, but it'll just be, hey, look, I played this, and what I thought about it, and the lengths that I took to actually get the game, like going into the shop, or whether I got it from a friend, and all of those sort of opinions that come in. There'll be some lovely games in there, and there'll be some downright stinkers in there. I don't think at this moment I'm ready to sort of like do a here's an all versions interactive retrospective of the game 180, and here's the Spectrum version, here's the Amstrad version, all of that. I probably will just mention whether I played them. When it comes to the 8-bit stuff, you see, I've discovered an awful lot of games for emulation, because my 8-bit era ended about a year and a half to 2 years into me having an Amiga. And to some people that would mean it goes up to 89, but it doesn't. I had an A1000, and I had it a day one edition, and I got it late 85, early 86. I think it was late 85, yes. So when you consider that, a year and a half, I was out of the Commodore 64 by about 87. And that's where some people were buying Amigas for the first time, also waited about a year and a half before they got rid of their 8-bit machines. So you can see there's a lot of interjoinality here in regards to crossovers and where something ends and where something starts. So just want to say thank you very much for those shout outs, and I suppose we ought to really start going into the questions. So we start off with Denny, my good mate Denny. He's got his own channel. I always put my stuff in the description. I do recommend that you sometimes look at my description, not all the time, But there's some fantastic links there. They're all my friends. They've got some great channels, and I only ever put the ones really there that have got content that I think you'd enjoy based on what I enjoy. So I hope you do go and look at the description sometimes. But first off, let's go with Denny. So he said, "Happy anniversary, Del, to your channel. Love how your channel is opening up to different formats for video. Your latest about 8-bit games is just right on my retro streak. Thank you very much for that feedback. It's really nice to get feedback like that. You never really know how you're doing. Analytics things, but not necessarily." So he moves on and starts talking about the blog last week in regards to the news, Nicola Sturgeon leaving, Roald Dahl's treatment of how his books are sort of like being, words are being omitted to a word that is better for today's times, which I don't actually agree with on that one. He had his own answers to some of the questions. Just seeing if there's anything up here. He said, Robert brought up a great question this week. I agree with you, Dell, regarding text adventures. Yes, these days you could have animated backgrounds and speech incorporated into the game. Another genre of game I'd love to see make a bigger comeback are dungeon crawlers like Dungeon Master and I the Beholder. Yes, they're starting to come back, aren't they? I mean, we've just had the C64's version of a classic just been redone, and it would be nice to see that come back. So he's got a question for me. And just before I go to that, I'm going to have some product placement. You know about my fresh orange juice by now. Oh, lovely. If by some miracle you could travel back in time and go back to when gaming first started in the early 80s, would you love to relive probably one of the best times of our lives? And I have actually had a similar. That's a question that I've seen in many different ways. It's said in different ways, if you see what I mean. For which there is always, therefore, possibly a different answer for. Because I've always said, am I going back into my body of back when I was in the 80s and reliving that emotion that I got, or am I a fly on the wall watching myself? From a certain perspective, going back a little bit like Scrooged and seeing your past is a double-edged sword, because you want to be there playing it or doing whatever you're doing there, but you also know you've lived it and you don't know whether you're going to continue your life from that point. So it's very difficult to say you'd like to do that, but I think a lot of people that turn around and say they don't want to be a fly on the wall for when something happened in their life is wrong. They're fooling themselves. I'd love to sometimes go back and remember exactly what I said when I was in an argument, say, or if I was in a meeting and in the meeting they said I said this, and in my brain I don't remember saying that whatsoever. So going back into the question about arcade games, of course those are lovely moments. There were very few bad times in regards to getting a game, because even if it was bad, it was the enjoyment of looking forward to it, going down to get it, opening the package when you get home, reading the instructions, loading it up or installing it, and then playing it. And sometimes you'd get a thumbs up, yeah, this is just what I wanted, and it's just like the reviews. And other ones would be, I don't know what they saw in it. And then there are other ones like, what a load of crap this is. And people, most of them know my Rise of the Robot story. So, a great question. Thank you very much, Denny. I hope it answers it. That, yes, I think if I'm a fly on the wall, great. If I'd like to go back into my own body, yes, please, because the emotion would be there, the smells and everything of what was going on is heightened, like VR. But it's a double-edged sword, and I have to be a bit careful, because I might be seeing something that I don't my memory says didn't happen. Thank you very much, Denny. So the next one we've got is Carl Todd. Hi, Del. Happy belated birthday to the blog. Enjoyed your blog and the additional adverts. Thank you so much. Like again, I really do appreciate getting some feedback. It said, you mentioned Ronald Dahl in your blog last week, but I don't recall you ever talking about novels. So, 1, do you have a favourite author? 2, can you think of any books that you have read about that you prefer more than the movie version? Actually, books have come up. I think it was actually Colin that asked me what my favourite science fiction writers are, what my favourite series is. Yours is specific about a favourite author, and have I read a book where the book is better than the movie version? If you want to know, Douglas Adams is my favourite author. Ever since I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the books after that, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, they were all fantastic books to me. And that answers that question in regards to, was the book better than the film? Oh my God! I love the TV series. I love the radio play. I've even seen the stage production of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. When the 2000s film came out, less as impressive as all the others. And in some circles, it's not even considered a thing, and it's wiped out of people's memories as saying it never happened because it was that bad. It is bad. I don't write it off though. It tries to do probably too much and tries to appease the fans too much and goes off in too many different tangents and directions to appease the right hand side of the audience, where the left hand side of the audience is alienated, and then the left hand audience. It's that sort of thing, analogy that I put to that. So I hope that answers that question. And then he's got another one, number 3. I saw a story in the news about Amazon releasing a voice controlled kettle last week. I wondered if there were any voice controlled gadget or activity that doesn't exist yet which you wished were available. That's a toughie. Now, I used to work with people that have got disabilities. They used to call it assistive technology. And therefore I had to go on many courses on how to install Dragon Naturally Speaking, how to train people up on how to record their voice, and how everything was going to understand in the vocabulary, and teach them how to write a document up, because it's not like me just talking. You have to talk in a specific way, like dear so and so, comma, new line, paragraph, indent. I am writing this letter, comma, because I am disgruntled with the outcome of my last letter, full stop, space, new capital letter, new word, etc., etc. That's how you have to speak in regards to getting something done. Take it like this, my car doesn't have the latest technology in it, and I'd love to have bought the higher model car which had some bells and whistles, like Google Maps integration, where mine is just a sat nav. But when you hook up my phone to it, you can basically send a text message from my phone by speaking. So I can have my phone hooked in. I can put it into driver mode for my phone, so it basically cuts off all sorts of stuff that you can't do while you're driving. And I can say open text, and then it'll open a text, and then it'll say, then I can go dial text for Mainmeister, new text. Hey Mainmeister, why haven't called me, you bastard? Love and kisses, Deli Welly. Send text. And it will do that. Google's API that you can buy is pretty good, pretty stable. And those sort of things I don't think distract from when you're driving. They aid you. And there are times where, when I was working on networks and I had to go from office to office, there were times people were trying to get in touch with me. Um, Stupidly, the government turned off Bluetooth off of their phones because it's a way that you can get into the phone for hacking, which meant it couldn't therefore link up with your own phone, your own car hands-free. That meant that I had to give certain people my personal mobile, which would hook up to my hands-free. So, hope that answers your question, Carl, and just goes to show you how some businesses think how things should work and how they shouldn't. Then we get to Milfy Swimbuckle. Oh, thanks, Milfy. Milfy, pretty much, I can't remember a week where he hasn't asked me a question, even during the bad times. I think there might have been 1 week out of 52. So, my God, that's pretty good average, isn't it? Question for your next vlog. This is more of an opinion of mine than a question, and I was wondering if you held the same or different view. For me, better graphics or more modern graphics can spoil a game and often don't look that good, even when compared to the old game it may be copying. 3D for me was often bloody gut-wrenchingly awful, especially during the 90s and early 2000s, and it can still be today in all truth. And it would have often have been better to go with simple 2D, hand-lovingly drawn graphics than blocky 3D. Especially true if you look at fighting games of these times. Couldn't agree more. I remember getting the PlayStation 1 and being wowed. And one of the early games I got was Wipeout. It didn't take very long before things like Tomb Raider came out. And when you get to something like Tomb Raider, it can then start to become very dated. There were models that I remember seeing that they're generated wireframe with texture graphics for Jurassic Park, which at the time looked amazing. But when you put them on now with the resolutions that you've got and the fact that there was no such thing as HDMI and all of that sort of stuff, you see that the technology was great at the time and not now, and it ages it very, very quickly. From what some consider to be the perfect game, which is Mario 64, not because of the 3D, but because of how the game was written, the complexity of the game, and what a game should be. And the 3D in that was, I thought, good, but not brilliant at the time. And so when you look at it now, it looks distinctly bad, and a lot of it can be also because of the way that the camera was implemented, on how you rotated what you could see compared to where you were moving. It must have been an awful lot for the programmers to have to try and get their head around, to make something really, really astonishingly fantastic. This is why 2D platform games are great, because they have a lineage where you can see them getting better and better and better, and as we increase our graphic resolution, and the amount of colours we can have on the screen, they still are fun to play now, and look sort of modern. I'm sure you've come across the term 2.5 graphics, which is sort of like a 2D platform with a bit of depth. So they call it 2.5D. So I'm in total agreement with what you're saying, Milfy. 3D ages things really bad. And there was an interesting discussion on Discord where they were talking about the Nintendo 64 in regards to the Mister. There's lots of documentaries on in regards to the Nintendo 64's hardware development. It's a very, very long and convoluted development the Nintendo 64 had, and to keep costs down, they got this fantastic system and then cut back with how graphics were going to be implemented in regards to memory usage, bus speed, and how the graphic and the CPU talk to get together, because they tried to implement it in one, because that's how Silicon Graphics, which was their co-partner at the time, tried to develop the system. It's why some of the games just don't work very well, because the architecture of that chip and the architecture of the board itself is just so convoluted. So I hope that answers that for you, Milfy. Thank you very much and for your continued support. It's really, really appreciated. And we get to Wee Bob Art. Happy 1 year anniversary. Thank you so much, Bob. He said, so question for next time. I'm heading off to bed. And something that popped into my mind was that I loved having themed duvet covers as a kid. I'm sure I had a Transformers and a Spider-Man one. Do you remember having a duvet cover that was themed that you loved? If not, would you have one now? And would it be Spider-Man or something else? All the best, Dal. I'm looking forward to season 2 of your blog. Yeah. How embarrassed do I want to be with this? Yes, now, as a kiddie, my mum did buy me a duvet cover that I loved. And I hated it when it wasn't on my bed because the sheets had to be changed. And it was a car. And it was a red car. And if you can imagine, the windscreen was at the top, where you pull the covers up towards you, and it had a big sleek body, and when over the sides it had the wheel arches and the wheels, and it was gorgeous. Loved it to death. And my dad eventually bought me a Spider-Man one, which had my favourite artist, John Romita Sr., all over it. Loved it. Have I got duvet covers now, and do I use them? I'm happy to say I don't use them. Have I got them? Yeah. Quite a few Marvel ones. In fact, my passion for Marvel, the comics, and my collection, I've even got those headscarves, what do they call them, bandanas, that you can, with Spider-Man images. I've got COVID masks. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to embarrass myself anymore, other than saying, yes, I've got themed things. I do stop at underpants. I haven't got themed underpants. I think somebody once bought me for Christmas underpants with Monday to Friday on them, because it was a 5-pack. What do you do about Saturday and Sunday? Well, we've had this discussion with socks, haven't we? So thank you very much for that. And we move to LFC, Gamer and Vlogs. Happy anniversary, Dale. Hard to imagine it's been a year since your first blog. Where on earth has the time gone? Brilliant. He commented himself about the Roald Dahl section, and he even went back to doing a second blog because he felt so powerful about it. Thanks for doing that. It sort of like shows to me, without you even commenting, that you actually watch my blog. So that made me give a big smile, because it's lovely to get a shout out. I don't get too many, hardly at all. But when somebody springs up a discussion or topic where they feel passionately about something and then do it, that's just as nice as getting a comment or a question. But he did put, for the lack of questions in recent weeks, I'm going to take my time for me to rectify this. And here we go. Number 1, are there any movie tie-in video games you think are better than the film they're based on? Yes. The one that comes to mind, and it's because I had the biggest disappointment with it at the time, and we're going back to the year 2000, was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, you look back at it now, and there's only certain things that people don't like Jar Jar Binks and its gobbledygook language and some of that sort of stuff that's in it, because I was totally engrossed with the lightsaber battle and some of the set scenes. But as a whole, it was a bad film. But there was a game, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, that I got for my PC, and it was at the time where Voodoo graphic cards were coming into their own, and I'd moved away from my Power VR at that point and moved to Voodoo, and that game shifted like crazy, and I was playing one of the best parts of that film. In fact, if you were to ask anybody what bits do you remember about the Phantom Menace, they'll talk about the pod racing scene. So I hope that answers your question. Number two, is there a particular song you used to enjoy listening to, but over time have become sick of it due to it either being overplayed on the radio or perhaps you put on repeat just a few too many times? Well, that's a difficult one to answer because I do have, and I had earworms worst time that you can get it. And if anybody knows what an earworm is, it's something that suddenly comes into your brain and you can't stop humming it. And it can be a jingle from an advert, or it could be a theme tune to a TV series, or whatever. But is there a particular song that you used to enjoy listening to, but over time you've become sick of it? Can't think of one totally at the moment. Um, Not really. I'm I'm bound sure to have one. I'm going to, when I write back on my comment to you, because I answer all my comments, but it's usually a week after this blog, I'll write one in for you because I know there's one. It's just it's not coming to my brain at the moment. And number three, favourite character and favourite episode of Frasier. You bastard. You get my number one salute for that question. Um, Frasier is one of those shows where I've said it from day one. It's not about the individual, it's about the ensemble of characters. Because if you weren't on your top game filming that show, and enough time spent for every single line of dialogue, you stand out as being the worst thing about that episode. Now, if you want to know who I fancy in that show, it's Roz. Not that there are many women that I could actually turn around and say are in that show, but at least it had some. It had, two regular. Um, but favourite character. I think I'm going to have to just turn around and say that, like Star Trek, there is a trio. A famous trio, like in Star Trek it would be Kirk, Spock and McCoy. If you didn't have Frasier plus his brother plus the dad, the show wouldn't work. You had to have the dad. The dad is the sort of like the past that you're trying to forget, but also trying to adapt into your life because really. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd love my dad to still be here. Frasier in the early days tries to dismiss all of that, not have him around, or at least not in his life every day, every minute of the day, and living with him. Later on, couldn't live without him. And now with the new Frasier series that's being talked about at the moment, we've lost the actor. So, you got to look at that as going, how is this going to play out? But then again, I think it will play out quite well in the new series because I've lost my dad and life goes on. How is Frasier going to live knowing that he has to move on from his dad? But then there is the Frasier and Niles, and they bounce off of each other. And Niles, I always thought, had the best lines, and Frasier, the Kelsey Grammer who stars as Frasier, directed a lot of the show. So I have to look at it and turn around and say he wrote the best lines for Niles. So from that point of view, fantastic. I'm not going to give you therefore a good answer in a favourite character because I think it's a trio. Favourite episode, probably Moon Dance. where Niles finally goes to for a dance with Daphne. But I think that's a fan favourite of an awful lot of people. There was another one where there's a favourite sequence of mine where Niles is trying to get ready for a date and is using Frasier's apartment, and he's trying to press his get ready and everything. Now, he's got the meal cooking at the moment, and then he notices a spot on his trousers, and because he's such a finickety, fiddly type of person, he takes his trousers off and tries to get rid of the blemish mark. He cuts himself, any sight of blood, and he passes out. He's trying to press his trousers, leaves the iron on the trousers, so they start to burn. When he picks up the trousers, they're so hot, he puts it onto the... it flies onto the settee. The settee had some chemical on it where he was trying to do it, so it sets on fire. He gets to the dinner and has to put the whole fire out with the cooking that he was doing. The whole preparation of this date ends in 5 minutes. It's one of those slapstick 5-minute moments that sticks out in my brain. So Moon Dance as the episode, probably that as the best sequence in the whole of the series. Hope that answers your question. And then finally we got Steve's Gaming. Steve, thank you so much. Happy anniversary, he says. Steve's one of my closest people that I speak to. We get on so well. He contacts me outside of a blog or my channels, talks to me in a private message in Discord and so forth. He's got a silly question for me. NASA decided to send a probe into deep space and ask you to select one video game and one film as prime examples of the best of human creativity. What do you pick and why? You're going to get that. That's all I've got to say about all of that. I think there's a big reason on why NASA, when they sent up the Voyager probes, didn't put films and stuff. If I remember rightly, they sent up a gold laserdisc. Don't know why they thought the laserdisc was the best format. Which had, if I remember rightly, just pictures of humanity and the sounds of animals and snippets of sound, and I think some text, if they could read it, about Earth and humanity. And they purposely kept away from sending like you'd get in a time capsule, where somebody could put a memory stick in there and put things that we used to be watch on TV and all of that sort of stuff. So if I'm reduced to films, a TV series, well, I ain't going to send up things like Armageddon or Apocalypse Now or I don't know, Pixels, or the film Pixels, or Star Wars even, or those sort of things. Like the same way you wouldn't put Film 77 on as a film to watch when you're on your in-flight movie. So I'm going to choose the game Tetris because I think it will probably impress with maths because it's shapes, trying to get lines, all of that sort of stuff. I think they'd get their head around it as well, what the game is. Probably find it very simplistic. And as a film, I don't know, probably Apollo 13 or First Man. Probably just to show that we've tried to go into space ourselves and we've learned an awful lot and come across so many things, so many hurdles that we've had to come across. And from that point of view, we've needed to overcome those hurdles and get to the goal. And that might show a weakness in us because Apollo 13 is obviously a fail. But is it a fail because we learnt so much from that? First Man would be for a different reason, where it shows the space program from the start, from that point of view, they probably know our technology is not that great. They probably now want to destroy us. It'll be like Space Invaders. So that comes to the end of the questions. Now I have to apologise because I'm going to tell you now the next section, which is what I've watched. And last week I skipped that, and it's because I was moving back and forth through my notes. So I'm going to do what I've watched this week, but I might go back if I've got time to tell you what I watched the week previous, because I do like this section. I do like to tell people what I've liked. So what have I watched on YouTube this week? So I've watched from a guy called, or a channel called MIDI In. There was interesting box that I heard about 6 months ago called MIDI SID. It's a MIDI controller with 2 SID chips in it that you can connect to your keyboard or connect to your PC and write music. And because it's got dual SIDs in it, you'll be composing modern music using the SID's capabilities. So you can change the oscillation, the waveform, the different instruments, and alter that, so pitch bend and so forth on it. And it interested me. The trouble is, it's $199. So I'm put off by the price. It's not supplied with 2 proper SIDs. It's some of the sort of like NAN type chips that are in there. But they will actually supply it with 2 SIDs if you want. But I think he wants you to supply those chips. He bends away from doing it because he doesn't want to damage your chips. He also doesn't want to receive 2 damaged chips and then you turn around and say they were working when I sent them to you and get into all those arguments. So yeah, so that was something that I watched. PC Builder. Now the reason I watched PC Builder this week is because just like the last couple of weeks, a couple of my friends in Discord and everything have been buying new PCs. And I'm intrigued on the speculation at the moment on Nvidia's RX series. Now, they've just released the 4000 series of RX cards. The 3000 series, therefore, you would think would go down. Nvidia have been arses, to be quite honest, about all of this. There was a point where cryptocurrency, I believe, was being utilized using what they call Nvidia mines. You linked up a load of Nvidia cards and used cryptocurrency for the usage on the cards. So they built these huge rooms filled with networked Nvidia cards for cryptocurrency. Then they stopped buying them because the bottom fell out of this cryptocurrency process. And so the market then was flooded with cards that you could buy second hand. Trouble was Nvidia upped their production on the cards, so they've now got a backlog of tons of cards, but they won't drop the price on them, even though the 4000 cards are out. Apparently that's all changed next month. They're going to drop. Now I'm in the sort of market for upping my graphic card because I know that I could put that into a new board if I wanted to. And if I was to buy one, I still wouldn't buy the top end one. I think the eye I'm looking for is a RX 3060 Ti, because that's always been my happy middle ground. If I could afford a 3070, I would, but the 3060 Ti is usually the one I go for. So if that comes down to a good price, I'll buy it. So that's the reason for that. This week in retro was quite good this week. They did an ST versus Amiga in regards to reminiscing about how we used to fight and squabble about which was the better system. You know, like it was against the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum and Amstrad squabble. There was one against the Amiga and the Atari ST. And so apparently there was a question and a website that was talking about that. And then there was another section that intrigued me, which was one of the characters on the channel, he's having problems with your KVM switch. And that took my memory back to the KVM switch issues that I had in the server room. Yes, we spent thousands of pounds on equipment, and therefore we didn't scrimp and save at Lloyd's Bank on KVM switches. They needed to do a specific thing. We couldn't have something not synced to a monitor, say, for the display, or the keyboard suddenly not work, or the mouse. So we found a good model and stuck with it and kept it. He's trying to do a range of PCs through the years, a 386, a 486, a Pentium, etc., etc. So of course the graphics change, CGA, EGA, VGA, SVGA, and so forth. So of course certain monitors don't sync when they go through the KVM switch. Yes, that was quite interesting. And the last thing I watched was RMC, so it's the same sort of channel. He was talking about the forgotten Commodore called the 900 or the C900. That was really, really good because I'd forgotten about the development of the 900 because it was happening at a time where Commodore hadn't bought Amiga yet. So they were working on their own 16-bit chip, and it was going to be the Z8000, if I remember rightly. So moving away from their own chip a little bit there by going to Zilog, and it was talking about it being a Unix system, and it was modular. So you bought the boards that you needed to make it work. It came to making production models. I think several were made, but then they disbanded it because, as anybody knows, the story of Commodore drastically changed with the managing director, co-founder, Trammell, leaving Commodore, going to Atari. Atari trying to buy the Amiga chips from the company, and then Commodore stepping in and buying them outright, but allowing them to keep their name. So, yeah, interesting. So that was what I watched on YouTube. Other than I watched lots of videos on how to get DroidCam to work, which I showed you right at the very beginning, where your webcam works. I don't know what you thought of it, whether you thought that the angle was good or whether the sensor was good. Go back if you want, have a little look. I could easily change my webcam, which is oh god, what is it? A Logitech 920B, I think it is, to a webcam, to a phone. I'll leave that open to judgment. So what have I watched with your stuff? So I watched 20th Century Gaming. He did a walkthrough of Pig Quest, so I could only sort of watch the first three because I've bought Pig Quest myself. Yes, I've bought a Commodore 64 game at last in a digital format, and I want to play that, so I don't want to see the walkthrough, do I? So I want to support his channel but don't want to see too much, so I was in a bit of a quandary and said I will stop at 3 and don't want to see all the levels. But I also watched his live stream this week, and he did a walkthrough of Action Biker Clumsy Colin, for which I've completed that game, so that was just fun to watch. Then we come to Magda, which I destroy her name. I was a bit down this week. I'm trying to keep my demeanour up, so I started to watch a few more of her videos. If you don't know much about her videos, it's more self-help, more blog, as in I'm having a bad day today, I want to talk to you about it, I need to get it out of my system because I'm going into work and I don't want it to overpower my day, so talking about it might free me up. But it's all little 5-minute, 10-minute videos, and they're brilliant. But in one, which really made me smile, she did a self-help on trying to dye her hair using ingredients that you'd buy off the shelf instead of buying hair dye. So she bought powdered cinnamon as a colour dye. So you can imagine you bought loads of cinnamon, and you stick it in a bowl. And then she poured into it honey, because that gives it some of the oils, normal shampoo and conditioner to give it that oily base. I don't know whether she went to the point of putting an egg in it, but she kept putting more and more ingredients in. I think some sugar was there and all sorts of stuff. Made it into a paste. And what she did was she then went upstairs and smeared this paste all into her hair. She got quite long hair, so it had to be doubled up a little bit. And then kept it on her head, she thought, for about 4 hours. Well, after an hour, the scalp started to tingle. She started to go on fire. Feel like a burning. She didn't know whether it was burning her skin. So she went into the shower quickly and washed it all away. And luckily, there was a reaction, because she knew that something was happening, not only from the sensation, but there was some on her hands, and that was starting to itch. So whatever was in there was having an allergic reaction to her skin, I think, and she washed it all out. The next day she was laughing about it. So the next day she does a blog and she says, that was an epic failure, wasn't it? And she had a big smile on her face saying, at least I've told you guys not what to do. I thought that was fantastic. It made me smile. It was the best 5 or 10 minutes of my week, just seeing somebody have an epic fail, but then come away and smile and laugh about it. Thank you so much, Magda, for making my week on that one. And then I watched quite a long video from Panther this week. He was doing PC tunes, 10 of the best, along with his pal, and I was quite engrossed by it all. I have to say, when it comes to PC gaming, it's quite difficult to do something like this, because when the CDs came out, they started to employ modern composers, and they could use big orchestras, and they became tracks that were put onto a CD, and so they sound like a soundtrack to a film. So you have to ask yourself, what is it about this? Because the way that we were in the past was there were tunes that were done with the sound hardware of the device that you bought. That even happened at the early days of the PC, where you could buy a sound card that was Sound Blaster and use quite nice sounding instruments, still not fantastic, or you could go the MIDI route, download sound fonts, proper piano sound fonts, and have fantastic sounding music. But it's MIDI, so that you only have sort of like 16 tracks to play with, and it still sounds electronic-y. To have a full orchestra in a game is brilliant, but you're limited, because if a track is 4 minutes long, you can't go to the middle segment of that 4 minutes. When a dramatic action happens in the game, you've got to cut to another tune and know that something bad has happened in the game, so it's very linear. Taking all that away, it was a fun listen to. Definitely one that I like for my walking, because I'm listening to the tune and the waffle afterwards in regards to what is it about it that you like. But it's sort of why don't you do a soundtrack show then, rather than on PC gaming and so forth? Because soundtracks have been around for years. They've come on in leaps and bounds. They've adapted and changed through the years. There's, you might as well have done that. But I'm not going to put it down, because I actually liked it. Made me smile. I'm listening to it even now on my walks at the moment, because I've got a few less blogs for me to listen to at the moment, because they're just not being uploaded. So, I've got a lot to listen to. So I have to thank my old mate Panther, who I haven't spoken to for a while, and he's always in my thoughts, because he was one of those mentors like Mainmeister is, and such a great guy. And every single time he puts a video, you can see the amount of work he puts into it. So that was great. Then we've got LFC. Now, LFC's output is sort of like astronomically risen. He did a blog, then he didn't like that blog, so did another blog, and, and then he did a top 5 attract sequences in games for arcade machines. What I mean by attract sequences are, if you go into an arcade, you know directly what game you want to play and where it is, because you can hear the 5 or 10-second intro of a tune, or the sound effect from the game. And if you then walk up to the game, you'll see some sequence, like a commando putting on his jacket, ready to go into battle for the game that you're about to play. So that's an attract sequence, and very interesting set of attract sequence. Not one of them was one I would have chosen. I'm a bit picky, I think, in regards to attract sequences. So go and watch it, because you've now got a reason to have a look and see whether his choices match your own. And LFC entertains me every week. Thank you so much, LFC. I'm so glad I mentioned your show, your channel. You're doing great stuff. Always some interesting bits in there. Then we get to Steve's Gaming. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming back so I can do all of this shit to you. He started off a new sequence of projects. This one is called All-Time Faves, or ATFs. Now, I had to, when I saw it come up on my feed saying here's something that you might want to watch, I went, what the is ATFs? My God. So he then explained what it was, and he's done 3 so far. The ones he's covered are the VCS, the Atari 2600, the ZX81, and the BBC. Every single one enjoyable. These are his all-time favourites, and so they are not possibly going to be yours. But he does 10 games in each, and again, it might not be quintessentially a top 10 that you'd go to a poll for and find out these are the top 10 games. It has to be something that you have a nostalgic bent for, something that draws you back, something that if you put it on, oh my God, I'm going to find it great difficulty to stop it and move on to the next one for this channel. That's going to be a hard one to do, because I tell you what, if I get engrossed in a game, I want to continue playing it. So, my God, you've got to sort of like hone yourself in. But just to let you know, there's still not enough death sequences in it, Steve. You're too good at your games. Start dying a bit more, just so I know that you're being tortured. Thank you very much. Salute to you, Sir Steve. Thank you so much. And we move on to Robert's Retro Gaming. He did a step back video this week. Very interesting, because to be quite honest, he's now got to go back to work. He's finding it very difficult to maintain a level of games that he wants to show us all. In other words, he can't keep up with the demand, I think is what he's trying to say, because his channel is that successful. And I'm so glad for that as well, by the way. So he's just mentioned he's scaling back a little bit, but there's still going to be all the stuff that we love. This week he did a gameplay video of Gyrus for the Atari 2600, which I'm in two minds about, because I did a Gyrus myself, and I had the Atari 2600 Gyrus back in the day, and it really was an immense thing back then, because the hardware just can't handle this sort of stuff. This version had a tune playing in the background with no slowdown. It had the star field, it had the whole circle, the formations that came in. I found that to be darned exciting for a console that really was on its last legs. So I list Gyrus as pretty much up there when I'm talking about games for that system. And then he showed Tetris Arcade, and that's because he gets heavily involved with the Mainmeister High Score kerfuffle that's part of the Discord, and they're playing Tetris at the moment. So lots and lots of stuff for you to watch there from Robert. I totally recommend you go and see that channel. Always entertaining. And then we get to Down the Rabbit Hole. So Down the Rabbit Hole has been very busy himself, but he's been very busy doing something that I'd love to actually do, really. He went to the Vancouver Fan Expo, which he hasn't been to for a couple of years. Now, I've been to quite a few shows, but I haven't been to any since COVID, really. I used to like going to the comic ones. This Vancouver one, he managed to meet up with Anthony Daniels, who plays C3PO. Now, I've met Anthony Daniels as well myself. Just to give you a bit of background, my comic store in the 90s had a very nice manager called Glyn, and he went to all the Star Wars conventions in London since Star Wars conventions started. So over the years, he managed to go backstage and he's met David Prowse and Anthony Daniels, and the list goes on and on. Over the years, he's not had them on speed dial, but he's been able to keep in touch with them and ask them, could you come to this convention, which I'm starting up? Because he did a convention in our town for 2 years, and he did some ones in the fringes, such as Leamington and Coventry and Oxford. And he always goes for a meal with them afterwards. Part of the deal is not only do they get an appearance fee, plus whatever they want to get for the signatures, but he will take them for a meal afterwards. So I've been to some of those meals afterwards, and that's how I met Anthony Daniels. Not that he'd remember me, and not that I didn't say anything more than about 2 words to him, because this table was huge, and you didn't really want to get out of your seat and go to each one of them and say, thanks so much for the day, can you sign this for me? It's a bit awkward. But I did, manage to get quite a few signatures, and I might get some of my signatures out and show them in front of the camera at some point. So definitely watch Down the Rabbit Hole this week. Definitely interested in all of the walking around and seeing the conventions. And definitely nice to see what he bought. He also bought a sort of like a lifelike Luke posable action figure. I've only got one of those Rabbit. I've got a Spider-Man Hot Toys. Hot Toys being one of the top brands from the company that I bought my statues from, Sideshow. And they do lifelike heads. This Spider-Man posable figure with so many articulated joints and hands, it's unbelievable, looked so realistic, the head, that it looks like you photoshopped the head onto the photos I take of it. You've got this cloth Spider-Man type of doll, and on top of it you've got the head unmasked, and the head looks like you superimposed it with Photoshop. That's how lifelike the heads are. So I'm looking forward to the video that you're going to do of your Luke doll, but do take into consideration that if that head is as realistic as you say, if you take them so sharp, you might find that it looks like you superimposed it. So I hope you get away with it, because I know I didn't. And then we come to my mate Mainmeister. I can't leave Mainmeister out. He did a Firefox handheld retrospective. He did his blog, and he also did a Top Tunes, just like Panther did. Only his Top Tunes is slightly different. It's more to do with tunes that we've grown up that were played on computers in games and made with the computers in mind. There are a couple of exceptions, but most of the time it is a remix of a SID tune, or a tune that's in a game where it could have been done in the computer, but has now been synthesized up and put into modern keyboards and that sort of stuff. Hugely recommend that if you can tune in live to any of those, do so. And that ends what I watched. Now, if I can go back to last week, I will, but I think we're going to be running out of time. So what did I watch this week? Well, I watched The Last of Us on Sky. It was episode 6. More of a build-up episode as we approach the final. It was quite interesting because I think there's 8 or 9 episodes in this season. We're up to 6. So you now got to sort of like build up the story to cliffhanger ending, because I believe from episode 2 it was being greenlit for a season 2. So that's interesting. Of course, this week Formula 1 is just around the corner for us. So I watched a lot of Formula 1 testing on Sky this week. The testing ended yesterday. And it was quite interesting to see how the cars have progressed this year. That was great. And then I started to watch, and I don't know if I'm going to continue to watch it, on Prime, I think this was, something called Physical 100. It's sort of like Squid Game, but with bodybuilders, and they're men and women. They are what they consider to be the top 100 in their class for physical strength and physique. And they've got a series of challenges until one man stands. A Love Island, therefore, for the health enthusiast, I suppose. I don't know. Watched a couple of them, quite interesting. My God, some people do take it to an extreme, though. I'm not. Some of them just, they concentrate on one area so much, they've got a muscle on top of a muscle on top of a muscle, that it just looks like you were drawn badly. But, that was when I watched it was entertaining. I'm not sure if I'm going to watch any more of it. And of course, we're all getting really excited if you're into Star Wars, because The Mandalorian returns. So as soon as we finished Last of Us, the lead character of that is then in The Mandalorian for season 3, and that's on the 1st of March. And I should think, therefore, Disney stock pricing will go through the roof as everybody suddenly starts to renew their Disney subscription. No, I'm sure that's not going to happen. But I am looking forward to The Mandalorian. And then we get to my stuff. So yes, very busy time compared to the other weeks. I did my 1-year blog. I did a special for you all where I did some adverts that come to mind when I think about adverts of the 70s and 80s. Not necessarily all of them. I did say if it was successful, I'd do more of them. The jury is out on that. The feedback I got was they loved them. And then people wanted to put their own adverts, which I would have then probably have done later on, because I've watched the same things that you guys have. So I don't know. You let me know yourselves. Would you like me to do more Watch with Daryl Boy adverts? Because I'll tell you what, I love doing it. I found it so much fun doing that video. I learned so much about OBS, and to be quite honest, reminiscing about adverts is just fun for me to do. I then bought a game. Yes, I know, bloody hell. It was a Jeff Minter game called Aka, and I bought it the hour that it came out, or pretty close to it. And I decided to play it for a couple of hours, and then I decided, do you know what? This is so new, it might be quite good for me to get a video out on it. So I did my own little retrospective video on it, and it's become probably quite successful, because it's had a lot of views, a lot of people that don't usually come to my channel, probably because they're searching for latest gameplay to see whether it's worth buying something. It's very much I've come to realise that it's a very Marmite game. I didn't think it was Marmite. I thought it was cut and thrust. You love Jeff Minter, you're going to love this game. And even the die-hard Jeff Minter friends that I've got even thought, I'm a bit unsure about this one. And some people have also looked at it from, well, if it was a failed arcade game that never even got manufactured 40 years ago, why am I going to like it now? And I think if you look at it from that particular perspective, you might be doing it a bit of disservice, because Jeff's put his own spin on it. I totally get it, though. If something has failed, why go back to it to have another fail? I look at it like this. It's a game. It looked interesting. The mechanic looked interesting. It didn't look easy, and I need a hard game so that, basically I've got a bit of a challenge. And so I took a chance. But for all the people that are saying, should I go and buy it now, I will say this: if there's nothing in any of the gameplay videos out there that you can go and see beyond my own, and of course I've listed what I think of it, you will not change your mind probably if your mind is still set, I'm unsure, by the end of watching 5 or 6 different people play it. So buy it in a sale. It is expensive. The reason I think it's expensive is because I think Atari purse strings have set the price, but also it's across the board on different systems. So it's on Steam, it's on Xbox, it's on PS5, PS4, and across those platforms I think it's got the same price. I think, therefore, the best value for money one will be the PC one, because eventually it will work on Steam Deck. It doesn't at the moment, but when it does, you've got a portable version and you've got a version that you can play on your PC on a big screen, and I can put my PC again on a 55-inch plasma. So at the end of the day, I've got the best of all worlds, haven't I? So that comes to usually a little bit of the end, unless I've got a topic, and I do have a topic of a sort. Denny reminded me that it was the anniversary of a particular cartoon character and book that I used to love as a kid. So I'm going to switch modes now and go to media playback, where you can see my notes, and just play the introduction to this character, and then I'm going to talk about it. So I'm just going to shut my microphone off. Yes. So if you haven't guessed, it's Mr. Ben. So what can I say about Mr. Ben? Yes. So the Mr. Ben is one of those shows that a lot of people think there were a lot of episodes for, and I will be looking down at my notes here because I'm not going to remember all of this. It was first broadcast on the 25th of February 1971 and ended in 1972 after 13 episodes. There were just 13 episodes between those 2 years. There was a 14th episode made in 2005, but that is different. Okay, so Mr. Ben came out between those 2 years. Each episode was 15 minutes long. There were 6 episodes broadcast between the 25th of February and the 1st of April 1971, and 7 episodes between the 21st of January and March 1972. It was broadcast at 1:30 p.m. on the BBC channel. Okay. It was repeated, therefore, twice a year for 21 years, with further repeats in 1993, 94, 96, 97, 98, and 2000. It was created by David Mackey. Now, he was born on the 2nd of January 1935, and he wrote 4 books. There was supposed to be 6, but he never got the 5th and 6th one published for multiple different reasons. Sadly for us, he died on the 6th of April last year, 2022. So he set up a business called King Rollo Films, and did some of the childhood stories that were in his book. Now, he was paid by the BBC 1 payment for this show, and he had it in his contract that there would be no repeat clause. So every time the BBC repeated it, he didn't get a penny. So he did not make an awful lot of money out of this show. It's a disastrous thing to hear about this, but I hear about it all the time in comics. If you're a jobbing artist and a company comes up to you and says, "Mate, do a drawing for me," then you're doing a drawing as an employee for them. That product, that drawing then becomes their property. They give you a check, here's your money, and then they can do what they want with it, and as many times as they want, and you don't get a penny. It's a shame. Now, that was quite a catchy tune. It was done by Don Warren, but that's a pseudonym for Duncan Lamont. Now, Duncan Lamont is a saxophone player, but he's also a composer, and he did a number of tunes for King Rollo films, because not only did they do Mr. Ben, they also did something called Towser, which is an animated dog cartoon, which ITV did for 26 episodes. But they also took on the Spot the Dog books. If you've ever seen the Spot the Dog books for young children, the BBC produced that for 1987, 1993, and the year 2000 with 18 episodes. Mr. Ben also, by the way, is available on DVD now and has been since 2005. So what is Mr. Ben? So Mr. Ben is a man wearing a black suit and a bowler hat, and he leaves his home which is at 52 Festive Road, London, and visits a fancy dress costume shop where he's invited by the mustached, fez-wearing shopkeeper to try on a specific outfit. He leaves the shop through a magic door at the back of the changing room and enters a world appropriate to the costume where he has an adventure. The adventure would ultimately come to an end, and the fez-waving person would bring him back to a back door where it would take him back to the costume shop, and the guy would give him a souvenir of his adventure. Now, all of these adventures usually would have a morality tale in it, just as they did of the time, because it's teaching young kids. Mr. Ben would then return back into his own clothes, leave the shop, and remember his exploits through the souvenir. That was it. 15-minute segment cartoons, but we watched them to death, and they were repeated so many times. I'm not sure if that is the most repeated show, because according to what I read, 21 years of repeats where it was repeated at least twice a year. That's a lot of repeats. And it's probably why our minds think that there were more episodes than there were. Now, in 1993, the shopkeeper that was in Mr. Ben, this is just a funny comment, he appeared in the R. White's lemonade advert, if you remember the R. White's lemonade drinker. He took the R. White's man into the back room and dressed him up as Mr. Ben to live an adventure as Mr. Ben. He then returns home, and all the children in the street are drinking R. White's lemonade. I actually did find that on YouTube. I haven't got it one downloaded for you to look at, but it's very, very funny. And that sort of like ends this sort of like blog. I'm just going to switch to my other cam now, just so that you can see here I am. Yay! And just show you the things that I bought, because I'm hoping this won't go out of focus too much. So over here we've got Training Day. Yes, not one of the most fantastic films I've ever used or seen, but it was a special Steelbook edition because I believe it's celebrating Warner Brothers 100th year. And of course my Mondo releases continue, where I'm buying my Marvel Steelbooks. You can see there's quite a nice looking cover there for Captain Marvel. Not the best film in the Marvel series, but a Steelbook nevertheless. And that one is drawn, not a photograph. It's gloss as well, covered by its protective sheet. And that therefore brings me to an end. I've hoped you've really enjoyed this particular blog. Bit more exciting, me using something different to record. And I'm going to leave you now, and hope that you're going to be watching me again in the future. Don't want to lose any of you guys, and just want to say thank you so much, and bye-bye, salute, thank you so much.